Hey folks, I'm Fundy.
And I'm Austin.
And this is The Dice and Quill, a brand new web series where we give you, the viewers, our discussions and opinions about everything role-playing.
We're going to be covering everything from something well-known like Dungeons & Dragons and everything less known like Flintlock and Black Powder.
That's right, everything from slinging dice out of a book to moving figures around and capturing that flag or taking that objective.
So today we're going to be answering the question. Today we're going to be.
Today's it being our first episode, we are going to first discuss the basics. What is role-playing?
Right, and for this discussion, we're going to be using Dungeons & Dragons just because that's going to be the most well-known role-playing, tabletop role-playing game out there on the market right now. So, to begin, we're going to tell you a little bit about ourselves and our experiences with role-playing games. Fundy?
Well, as you guys know, nickname's Fundy. That's what everybody calls me. And I started playing, well, backtrack. I started really young, probably about 9 or 10 years old, watching my brothers play D&D with their friends down in the basement around the pool table. And I used to think it was so cool hearing the stories, and I would imagine it in my mind, and I would play out these stories and these fight scenes and things like that. Eventually they let me play, and probably when I was about 13 I picked up my first set of books, but I could not get a hold of any Dungeons & Dragons books, and I started off with a very, very unknown game called Palladium. Some people might know Rifts. Same thing, Palladium's just a fantasy version of it. And so at 13 I rounded up my friends after talking their ears off ad nauseum about role-playing, and this is something that's awesome, it's cool, you know, let's try this out, and we did, and I think I had a little bit of an advantage observing how the game was played, observing the interactions between the characters at first, and I just ran, I took off, and I have been DMing games and playing in campaigns ever since then. I'm 30 now, so that's 17 years I've been playing, and I hope to play for a lot longer.
Well, hopefully we never have to grow up out of it. I actually started outside of role-playing games. I started with tabletop wargaming games. Warhammer 40K is how I started. Started way back when I was, I think 11 or 12 was when I first got my first armies. And after playing it for a couple years, we've come to find out it's a huge money sink. And for an 11, 12-year-old who got about $5 a week for my allowance, couldn't exactly afford to keep up with it. You know, eventually when I hit my actual teenage years, 14, 15, I was at Denny's and saw a group of guys playing Dungeons & Dragons in a corner booth, and me being nosy and curious, I kind of forced my way into the group, and eventually that's how I ended up playing D&D. Picked up Dungeon Mastering fairly early on. I started DMing at around 15 or 16. I'm 24 now, so it's about 9 years.
So almost 30 years experience between the two of us, and hope to get a lot more, like I said before. So that's a little bit about us, where we're coming from, our experience. Now, of course, we've played many other different games, systems, platforms, things like that.
And actually, one of the things we do is we have a whole folder of just different rule books for different games, and we've brought it upon ourselves to take each couple months, we each learn a new system and try to run that game just to learn something new. And that way we can take it and, disseminate it to the masses.
Right, because there is a lot out there, and I hope that we can cover quite a bit of it and help you guys figure out which game, which system would be best fit for you and your group. Mm-hmm. So let's start with answering the top question.
What is Dungeons & Dragons?
And I will start. So, what is Dungeons and Dragons to me, or just role playing to me? Dungeons and Dragons to me is a break from the monotony of life.
It's an escape from reality.
Oh yeah, definitely. You know, you wake up, you do your 9 to 5, you come home, you know, you cook, you clean, you watch TV, you go to bed. Rinse and repeat, day after day after day after day. Every now and then you can throw in that Dungeons and Dragons, and now I'm not waking up doing that 9 to 5 no more. I'm not going through the monotony of life. I'm strapping on a suit of armor, making sure my sword is ready to go, and I'm delving into some dungeon looking for some ancient treasure. It is an escape, a healthy escape. It is a new, not necessarily new, but a different way to spend time with your friends, with your buddies.
And so for those few hours that you and your friends are together, for those 4 or 5, sometimes 6 hours, you get to be whomever you want. The sky's the limit at this point. As long as you have an active and open imagination, anything, just about everything's possible within the realms of role-playing. You're not you anymore. So for, those few hours, you can set aside the troubles of real life and just have fun, come together as a group and work together to solve the obstacles set forth by the DM. And we'll cover the roles of all the players shortly here.
And it's never the same thing twice. You get your regular board games and things that you assume people do, sit around and drink beer and play cards. Well, I mean, it's the same game over and over and over and over again. It's something different every time. New characters, new campaigns, new quests, new monsters, new goals. Something different every time. And so it's, again, breaking that monotony and just something new, something exciting.
So coming down, because that's the soul of role-playing games in general, and going down to the more technical aspect of it, role-playing is kind of like collective storytelling, where you have a dungeon master, such as myself or Fundy here, acting as the narrator of the game itself. We spend anywhere from 3 to 6 months to years writing a story that hopefully will immerse our players in a world and keep them coming back over and over and over again. And the players, well, they're the characters in this story, except as having a set line of what they're supposed to do. The characters decide on what their story will be. You just create the world for them to write their stories.
I remember when I was younger, we used to have these books, the Choose Your Own Adventure books, where it would give you a scenario and it'd say, if you want to go left, turn to page such and such. If you want to go right, turn to page such and such. It's kind of like that. It's kind of like that. Except I'm the one writing the story in real time, and you're making those decisions. And then I adjust the story based upon your decisions. And we continue on.
So, that's the technical aspect of the game itself. Now going down to how the game is actually played, and this is my favorite part about role-playing games in general. You don't really need a whole lot. For people on a budget, like most adults, it really doesn't cost much. I spent $10 last night buying a set of dice, which you can get online or at any kind of game retail stores. Our rule books, this one being the Player's Handbook, I downloaded a couple for free off of Scribed, an online web service. Or you can go out and buy a physical hard copy, and I prefer to have the physical hard copy.
I do as well. You don't always have access to a computer or anything like that.
Exactly. And then past that, you need an open imagination, some paper, and a pencil.
Something to write with. Mm-hmm. And so with those things, dice, paper, pencil, book, I can take this game anywhere and I can create a story anywhere.
I remember years ago when I was in boot camp, we had little paper mache dice, and we were playing under the cover of darkness, hoping our instructors wouldn't catch us. And, in a stressful, high-stress environment like that, having just a little bit, even for our sessions lasted about 30 minutes to 45 minutes, it was still something that let us distract ourselves from the hardships of life at the time.
Yeah, we weren't that ingenious. We pretty much just did like pick a number between 1 and 10, and depending upon how close to the number you were, for success.
But the point being, you can play this any kind of role playing game anywhere. There's no limit to it. Mostly, I enjoy playing in the comfort of our own home. Fundy hosts his campaigns at his house, and I host mine actually right here where we're sitting now. And that's generally how you play the campaigns.
So the next is why it appeals to a large audience. Well, let's first talk about the elephant in the room, and that's the big old stereotype that everybody likes to think. And everybody imagines when they hear you say, I play Dungeons and Dragons, or I play X role-playing game.
And the biggest example that I've seen every time I introduce people to this game is, it's that one game they played on that show, The Big Bang Theory.
There's that. I always, hear the same stereotypes. Mom's basement.
40-year-old virgin.
40-year-old virgin. Cheetos and Mountain Dew.
I prefer pizza and Pepsi.
Yeah. I mean, those stereotypes bring with it kind of a negative stigma, and granted, there are some people that play the game that fit every single one of those stereotypes, but that is far, 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 far from the norm. I myself, I work in construction.
I work at the jail.
Right. Two people you wouldn't think when I take off my dirty old coveralls and sit down, I'm trying to figure out what new quest line I can whip up for my players and things like that.
And how to make your players cry, because you like to kill everything that's valuable to me.
Only if the dice allow it. But sometimes it's for story. Yeah, I mean, I'm a combat veteran. I was a artilleryman. Went to Iraq, the whole nine. I was in the Army for 5 years. A lot of these things that people don't really, and so what I get a lot is, really? You play Dungeons and Dragons? And yeah, I do, I don't have to fit your stereotypes. And really, my group is a lot of guys you wouldn't think that would sit down and play. I got a lot of ex-military guys. I got a lot of law enforcement guys, the cops.
The greatest example would be our former supervisor, Brown.
Oh, yeah.
He's someone you would never expect to play this kind of game, and we kind of forced him into it, but after the initial shock of things, he ended up really liking it to the point where he's, in the perfect world, would have us still working for him just to play this game.
Right. And so I go back on a previous point on where, Dungeons and Dragons or role-playing is an escape. And you got these guys that work these high-stress jobs and things like that, or you got these guys that work these just droll 9 to 5, click on a keyboard, or, installing HVAC systems day in and day out, and day in and day out. You get burned out with that. Sometimes you just want to go somewhere else. Some people choose sports. Some people choose video games.
Some people role-play.
Some people choose role-playing.
Which is an equally healthy thing to do, and in my opinion is a little healthier because, one, it doesn't have the same restrictions on this game as like any kind of published board games or video games. There's really no invisible walls or anything like that. It's an outlet. I've had players in the past who have worked out some very deep-rooted problems through role-playing. I mean, as a new player, I wouldn't suggest that, but it's happened before. I feel D&D has a lot more to offer. Well, role-playing in general has a lot more to offer than just a game in itself. And now, as DMs, there's something I like to call the DM or GM's promise, and it's the promise basically you make to your players. That you promise them that while the players are with you, they are free from judgment from the outside world while they're sitting at this table. You promise them that they're going to have fun, and that's the most important thing. Our job as DMs is to ensure you have fun. Otherwise, there's really no point to this. And so that being said, having fun. A lot of people ask me that I've introduced the game here recently. Have asked me, how do you win? And really, honestly, it's not a competitive game. It's a group game. You as a player have to come together with the rest of your group to surpass the obstacles that me or Fundy here as DM set forth to you. So in essence, we're the bad guys. Now, even with that being said, if we end up killing your character, the game ends. That's it. We don't win by killing you. So we have to make the game easy enough to where the problems faced can be surmounted, but hard enough to where it's still a rewarding challenge. And that's the basic makeup of any good and competent DM or GM out there. A rut a lot of newer DMs run into is writing a book, pretty much, and forcing their characters to go through a certain story path. And at this point, there's no choice anymore.
And for you guys that have been DMs for a while, you know that never works. It never works.
Your players will always try to find a way to break your game.
Oh yeah, definitely. I've been disappointed on quite a few. I spent all night writing up this awesome arc and things like that, and they go the other way down the road.
Or, I remember one time you spent a good amount of time working out a really, really good and challenging boss, only to have one of our players headshot him and end the fight before it even really started.
First round.
First round.
Round.
Which brings us to our next point of discussion is the dice. What do they represent? For me, the easiest way to explain it, the dice represents your just fate and random chance in general. And your character's skills and abilities will, of course, increase the probability of the dice rolling in your favor. So in most role-playing games, just about anything you do that requires some level of skill past your basic human function, or elf or dwarf, no discrimination, requires some sort of dice roll. And a lot of games use different dice, but today we're going to use the D20 system, one of the more well-known and prevalent rolling systems out there. And basically the D20 system is based off the 20-sided die. You roll it, add your stats up, and if your result is over a certain difficulty check level, DC, your character, of course, succeeds that check. And then you progress with the game afterwards.
In layman's terms, you roll the dice, you add some numbers that you already know because they're on your sheet, and you get above the number that the DM says you got to get above. That's pretty much it.
Yep. Another gameplay system is called the Uni System. This one was introduced to me by Fundy actually pretty recently here. And I really like it because it's really, really easy to pick up. It's based off the D10. And if I remember correctly, you have to beat a DC of 9 every time, right? And so to make checks harder or easier, of course, that you suffer penalties or bonuses to your roll. But the reason why I like the Uni System so much is because instead of a long character sheet, which I think I have one laying around here somewhere. No, I don't. No, not yet. A long character sheet with hundreds and hundreds of stats and skills and items, possessions, weight, magic, spell, resistance, all that stuff. It's just a quick thing you can make a character sheet with a scratch sheet of paper in about 5 minutes.
I think that's the only thing that we use to make character sheets for the Uni System is just notebook paper.
I don't even remember ever seeing any kind of published character sheets.
There are. They're just... I mean, why? Why when you can just use pencil and paper? Yeah, pretty much, I broke down D20 system in layman's terms. Uni System in layman's terms, you roll a D10, you add your bonuses that are already on your sheet, and you subtract your penalties, and if you get above a 9, you're good. If you get below a 9, you're not good. So that's it.
No. And the other cool thing about the Uni System, it can be applied to any setting you could possibly think of. We've done Uni System games from present-day zombie apocalypses to private investigation, murder mysteries, to the far reaches of the grim darkness of the 40K universe, if anyone's familiar with that. The last system I'd like to discuss before, because we are running out of time here, is The system I hate the most, so I'm going to let Fundy cover it, the THACO system. Fundy, this one is all you.
Well, it's not really the THACO system as much as it's a lot of you more seasoned players may have started out like I did with Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, AD&D. A lot of people swear by it and say it's the best system ever and nothing can compare to it. There was a combat mechanic in there called THACO to hit an armor class of 0.
You want to cover armor class real quick?
Armor class is essentially your defense score. And that's what the bad guys have to roll above in order to hit you, in order to do damage to you. If not, it bounces off your armor, or you block it with your sword, or whatnot, or they just miss entirely. And so AD&D and Dungeons & Dragons 3rd Edition kind of flip-flopped. In 3rd Edition, the higher the armor class, the better. In Advanced Dungeons & Dragons, the lower the armor class, the better. So, to hit an armor class of 0, let's say you are a fighter and your THACO score is a 12. Okay? So if you're fighting a guy who has an armor class of 0, you have to roll a 12 or better to hit him. Alright? If he has a higher armor class than 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, you subtract that, alright, from your THACO. So if his armor class is 3, your THACO is 12, then you only have to get 12 minus 3, 9 or better to hit him. But if his armor class is -3, you add 3 to that. So you'd have to get a 15 or better to hit him, because you need a 12 to hit an armor class of 0. It was a lot of math. A lot of it. And that's what I think steered me away from it. And a lot of younger players,
I never even bothered to pick it up.
it was almost like, I need a calculator here and a freaking compass, and let's just throw in, you know, an architect's T-square in order to figure things out. Dungeons & Dragons 3rd Edition made it so much simpler.
And something I like to do with 3rd Edition, especially with my new players here, most of my players now are the new ones, I streamline a lot of things, and that's the beauty of the rule books and whatnot of this game. Is the rule books are just guidelines. As a DM, it's really up to you how you want to run your game. I try to stick as close to rules as possible, but things like level 0 spells, I don't believe that there should be limits on how much times you can cast a level 0 spell. I try to make the game as enjoyable as possible, and I try to take out as much of the math as I can, just because with 3rd Edition, they've already done a great job of taking out a lot of that. But something I realize is initial character creation. If it's your first time ever making a character, the book doesn't really hold your hand through it. It does and it doesn't. There's a lot of unneeded information in that book. You know, lots of numbers, lots of charts and stuff that doesn't even apply to your character just yet at first level. So, you know, what I like to do is I'd like to have a whole separate get-together session where all we do is focus on creating those characters. And whatever questions that need to be asked will be answered that time. Because I did a character creation with a couple co-workers a couple days ago. It took us almost 5 hours to create all the characters. And even then, a couple of them aren't completely done yet. I have to go and do a couple tweaks for them and whatnot and optimize a couple of things. But, you know, don't take that as a discouragement, because if you're playing with an experienced player or dungeon master like myself or Fundy, we're more than happy to sit down with you and work with you to help you create the best character for you. Ultimately, though, it is your character, so as far as the personality one that goes, that lies entirely on you.
Right, and more and more as you play, you'll get faster and faster at it. I mean, I like he said, I play with more experienced guys, and it probably takes us like 20 minutes to whip up our characters.
Mm-hmm. I like playing with new players because they fall for my tricks. Yeah. So, well, folks, that wraps up the very first episodes of Dice and Quill. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Please leave comments giving us what you think. We're not sensitive people, so we can take some constructive criticism. And tell us what you want to hear about next. I believe the next time we'll be covering... We're going to go through a period where we're going to be covering Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah, classes and races and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
These will be shorter videos than our first introductionary video. We want to try to keep our format a lot smaller than this. So, yeah, we hope to see from you guys. We hope to hear from you guys. We hope you enjoyed this video. If you do, hit that like and subscribe button.
Or if you're on Facebook, just hit comment and leave a smiley face or a heart.
That too. That works for us. It works for us. We're simple guys. I mean, any kind of love, we like it. And speaking of Facebook, we do have a Facebook page. It is under a different name. It's called D20 and Friends. Look it up. I think we only got like maybe 50 members now. I want to add a 0 to that. I want 500 members on that thing.
Hopefully we can grow this community. The goal of these videos is to draw out those people who have an initial interest in these games, but either don't know anyone who knows how to play it, or is just afraid of being judged, which I understand where they're coming from with that. And that'll be a topic for another discussion. Well, folks, thanks for joining us today, and I hope you enjoyed what we had to say.
Bye-bye.
Stay classy, guys.